guard, but with no patients to see, doddered from staff meetings to clinical grand rounds to case conferences, leaving behind a trail of tangential, long-winded questions. He was everything, in short, that Millard had determined not to become. "How's the old-timer?" he asked, meaning the dog. He could never recall the animal's name, which was either Mr. Spark or Mr. Spike or something similar. "The old-timer was out the door 30 minutes ago," replied Elsa, rolling her eyes, and Millard realized she believed he'd been referring to her husband. Yet she didn't seem offended, and it was one of those misunderstandings not worth correcting. Certainly not during his final encounter with Elsa Duransky, which this was likely to be. No, a clarification now would only sound awkward, insincere. Far better to grin like an imbecile while Saul's wife filled the elevator car with plumes of gossip. Grin like an imbecile. They'd probably fire him these days if he used an expression like that in the hospital, or at a minimum make him sit through pointless online sensitivity training. He recalled how Isabelle had summed up their neighbor after a particularly tedious meeting of the co-op board. "Half of what that woman says is true. The problem is she doesn't know which half." Isabelle had possessed a knack for distilling people. "I rented a Lysander," said Elsa. "Did I tell you?" The boy's name corralled Millard's attention. Not that you could legitimately call him a boy anymore, not at 43. At 25, even at 35, you could get away with such terms. You could speak of him as a good kid with potential, of his early penchant for mathematics and his prodigious imagination. He'd graduated from Wesleyan after all. But 2 decades later, Lysander hadn't harnessed that imagination for anything except daydreams. "In the park," said Elsa, "walking his dogs." "Did you?" "Sweetest dogs he has," says Elsa, "although Mr. Scratch here might beg to differ." The terrier glowered at Millard, his snub nose Elsa's, his shaggy cliff of a brow distinctly Saul's, as though the beast had grown into the son the couple never had. The elevator stopped on 2, but the corridor stood vacant. Someone had given up and taken the stairs. "We're having lunch," said Millard. "I'll send Mr. Scratch's regards." Elsa hardly registered his remark. "What are their names?" she asked. A moment elapsed before he realized she meant the dogs, and then he felt a pulse of anger, uncharacteristic anger, that Elsa cared about something so trivial. Or maybe she didn't care, merely needed to fill the time-space continuum or dormant gray matter. And damn it, what were the names of those dogs? The car opened and they stepped into the lobby, where a cologne of damp hardwood, an old New York scent, hung perpetually in the shadows. "Adolf and Benito," he replied. They'd been the first duo to pop into his head. He could easily have said Abbott and Costello or Sonny and Cher, not that it really mattered. This was the solace of knowing that you wouldn't live to see the dawn, unabashed irreverence. Elsa's neck stiffened perceptibly, then relaxed. "Well, in any case, he's so good with those animals," she said. "Maybe you'll make a veterinarian of him yet." Maybe, but unlikely. What gnawed at Millard wasn't that his younger son had piddled away 21 postgraduate years without a full-time job or a serious relationship or even filing his own tax returns, but that Millard, embroiled in extraneous affairs, had let him. Still, in preparing for death, Millard found himself pondering whether a man who hadn't yet amounted to a bucket of warm glue might not generate an artistic or literary masterwork at the age of 43, or at least embark upon a career. That was indeed the purpose of their lunch, their final lunch, Millard reminded himself, his last opportunity to steer the boy onto the straight and narrow, as his own father would have said. All week, all month, he'd been ticking off his lasts. His last visit to the public library, his last lecture to the medical students, his last dental checkup. Although what a man planning to live 10 days wanted with a biannual dental cleaning was hard to articulate. He'd sworn to himself that he wouldn't deviate from his usual routine. So he'd renewed his subscriptions to Psychosomatic Medicine and Architectural Digest, prepaid his dues at the faculty club, requested an absentee ballot, as he always did, for a primary election in which he'd no longer be alive to vote. That afforded him the opportunity to back out, to reverse course even to the end. Yet as the appointed day approached,